Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some of my favorite weird news stories from the past few days. An 8-year-old wins $200 worth of cannabis products at a youth hockey tournament. If you can't already guess where this was from, in Toronto, a BC grandfather is questioning when it's appropriate to offer cannabis prizes and raffles after his 8-year-old grandson bid on and won a stash of $200 worth of pot products at a local youth hockey tournament. Keith Riddle said his grandson plays novice hockey with other children, ages 7 and 8, at Dawson Creek Minor Hockey. But at a tournament over the weekend, long-time tradition of fundraising took a turn. Each team is usually responsible for putting a gift basket prize or package together with a minimum of $50, he said in a phone interview. And then what they do is they have a big setup in a paper bag taped in front of each of these prizes. He said the prizes that have always been geared towards kids or families in the past, including things such as tickets to movies, card games, or family board games, or snacks like popcorn and candy. Riedel said that his son, who'd taken his grandson to the tournament, spent $10 on raffle tickets, gave them to the 8-year-old to bid on whichever prizes he liked. But when it came to the prize pack that Riedel's grandson would eventually win, all he saw was the chocolate fondue, and he put the ticket in the bag. And then at the end of the tournament, the family was notified that he'd won the prize and that the prize was $200 worth of pot. Child's father was the one who picked up the prize. After receiving the call of the win, he sent photos of the haul to Riedel. The pictures, of course, show various chocolate edibles, vanilla chai and other pot products, all stamped with the red octagonal THC symbol of legal Ontario cannabis. There was also what appeared to be a pipe and a lighter included. The $200 estimate comes from the advertising on the bag. He said Riedel said that when they had to explain to his grandson that the prize contained drugs and therefore he couldn't have any of it, he was pretty mad. My grandson thought that he'd won a great prize. He's like, "Dad, I won chocolate." And he said, "No, son, there's bad drugs in the chocolate." How do you explain that to a kid? However, the Dawson Creek Minor Hockey Association said in a statement provided to the CTV News that the prize was clearly marked for adults, and the cannabis was never out in the open where the kids were. Obviously it was, because he put his ticket in it, So it was clearly out in the open where the kids were. If the kids were able to bid on it. I don't think I need to explain that to you. I think you are intelligent adults. You can catch on to that. Amongst the number of prizes donate was a basket of cannabis products. They wrote the products did not appear on the donation table. Only a photo and a list of items contained in the basket. The raffle winner was told that the basket contained cannabis products and was given the option of not accepting the prize. Said the statement, referring to Riedel's adult son who picked up the prize. The winner chose to take the prize. Their identification was checked to ensure they were of legal age, plus 19. And the donor delivered a basket to the winners. The statement went on to say that they'd reviewed the policies of BC Hockey and the standard procedures for ticket raffles on the BC Gaming and Policy Branch, and they did not find any rules barring cannabis as a raffle prize. It was not our intention to upset any of the attendees at the event. The organization said in a statement, the tournament is organized by volunteers, and their objective is to have a fun tournament and raise money for the DCMHA to allow hockey to be more affordable and more inclusive. It's not good enough for Riedel, who called the situation ludicrous. He said that while drugs should never be at any sporting event, I kind of tend to agree with that. It was even more upsetting to have them available as a prize and geared at children, regardless of whether the prize pack was intended for adults. I was a policeman for 32 years, and you try to protect people from this stuff, and then your 8-year-old grandson brings up running into this, and it's just ridiculous, he said. He believes clear rules need to be set up to prevent this from happening. There is no place for drugs at a child's hockey tournament. The Dawson Creek Minor Child Hockey Association said they appreciate where the concern is being brought forth. We are currently updating our policies to ensure that going forward, our charitable events are keeping with our policies and government policies. This is an interesting one. Now that cannabis is legal in Canada, there is, and in certain states, there is a question of where is it appropriate to have it and where is it not appropriate. I think probably a children's hockey tournament on an auction table that children are allowed to bid on, probably not appropriate. It should be a similar situation to alcohol, right? Like it is the same age, 19 for drinking, 19 for smoking pot in Canada. So it should be more closely monitored. Like if you're going to be auctioning that off, make sure it's just available to the adults and not available to the kids at all. Someone should be checking that, making sure that nobody has that on the ticket, or you have to put your age on a ticket that's for an age-restricted product, something like that. Nonetheless, pretty funny, that an 8-year-old won $200 worth of marijuana products because he thought they were chocolate. Pretty silly stuff. When we come back, my worst fear, seagulls. We're going to talk seagulls when we return from of our break. So don't go anywhere.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, welcome back from the break. When we left off, we were talking about a young child winning a bunch of weed chocolate. Probably not what you were expecting to hear first thing off. How are we going to top that, you wonder? Well, a seagull, turns out seagulls study human behavior when they're scavenging food. So, in case these things didn't already freak you out, here we go. And if they don't freak you out, well, bully for you then, alright? Seagulls are freaky. A new study suggests that seagulls study human behaviors when they're trying to locate food. Researchers claim that it's one of the first studies of its kind to non-domesticated animals, which is scary. I thought they only studied us when they were domesticated. I guess it doesn't need to be scary. They're also living, breathing things. But I've got some stories about seagulls that we'll get into if I have time. In the UK, the county of Cornwall, hearing gulls are everywhere. That is absolutely true. I spent some time in Cornwall when I was living over there. So you wake up in the morning with them calling. This is Nelchie Bogart. You know, you go to bed, they're still calling, and their feces are just, everywhere. Flooded all over your house and your car, things like that. You're often hit by poop just walking around, which, of course, they say is good luck, but really I think that's just to make people feel better when they get pooped on. So that's from Dr. Neil G. Bogart, senior lecturer at the University of Exeter. And in many parts of the US and the UK, hearing a gull is the most common variety of the bird that many of us call a seagull. And they're not very well liked. Not very well liked. Not popular, those birds. Bogart recently surveyed people on her campus. His campus? Her campus? Anyway, about 30% like them and 70% hate them. Even many of her scientific colleagues don't have much love for the gulls. For people that do study biology, it's a 50-50. Dr. Bogart is one of the gull lovers, and along with several other scientists, she's been studying how gulls interact with humans to better understand our interspecies conflict, specifically when it comes to food. Last year, her team found that gulls will actually hesitate longer before snatching your French fry if you stare them down, so intimidate them. I think that's because you know that you're on to them, right? I mean, you're staring at them. It's like, someone's stealing something from your shop. If you stare at the shoplifting thief, they won't proceed, right? Now her team has found that gulls prefer to peck at food that they've seen in human hands. They tested that by tempting gulls all over Cornwall with plastic wrapped granola bars. One bar, her collaborator picked up and handled, and the other she left alone. After dozens of tests, as it turns out, the herring gulls preferentially approached and pecked the one that she'd handled. Bogart says this matters because it suggests that the gulls are modeling human behavior, something that's rarely been studied outside of domesticated animals, such as dogs. And this is one of the first studies in which we are aware of truly wild animal species that's actually probably learned based on human cues. She also hopes to remind us that the so-called bad habits of gulls are often caused by a hostile urban environment built by humans. Despite their prevalence in coastal areas, herring gulls are on the UK's red list of birds conservation concern, which is shocking. And I don't really sympathize. We have a light population. We have plastics in the ocean. They eat food scraps, and they're probably increasing in their cholesterol and psychological stress levels. If we do have some individuals that thrive, which strategies do they adopt to be able to survive in these challenges, and what do we impose on them? If you're not as opportunistic as herring gulls, does this mean that you're definitively doomed? Hopefully not. But one thing is certain, Bogart says, you should keep your human food to yourself next time you're feeling peckish. Well, I tried to do that. It was the summer of 2014. I was on the beach having lunch with my partner at the time, having a little wrap, cheeky little wrap on the beach, having a little beach picnic. And he started to say how much he hated seagulls. He hated seagulls. He thought that they were gross and dirty, and he hated how many were on the shores of this beach. And I was saying, what an awful thing that is to say, you know? This is their home that we're invading. And you can't say that this is right. It's not fair. This is, we're invading their home, so they're not being a disruption to us. If anything, we're being a disruption to them. So I was defending the seagulls. I want to emphasize that. This is important. And next thing I know, there's a seagull in my face taking the wrap out of my, like while I've held it up to my mouth to eat it, taking the wrap with its little claws, flapping in my face. It scratched my cheek and then flew away with my wrap. Flew away with it. I was defending it. And it bullied me. Okay, that wasn't my first encounter with a seagull. After that, I was on the phone with a friend of mine. I was in Wales. I was in Cardiff on the boardwalk. And I stopped dead, stopped talking. And he was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Oh, it's seagulls. I have a bad history with them." He laughed at me. And as he laughed at me, 3 of them flew into my face and flapped their little wings at me. All right? The third time, I'm in Dublin with my sister. And we're eating outside again. Classic mistake. And I catch eyes with one of the seagulls. It's eyeing me. It's watching me, you know? And she starts to laugh and she's like, "God, I hope it attacks you like the other ones." And then as she does that, it runs up to her and flaps its little wings at her. And I was like, "Yeah, buddy. That's right. They're on my side now." So I guess he decided that I'd had enough of the seagulls. You know, and he could be on my side now. What I'm saying is seagulls are jerks. Seagulls are jerks, guys. Been attacked by so many seagulls. They're bullies. Anyway, when we return from the break, we're going to be talking libraries and weird things that have happened in libraries. Starting us off with a quick little story. So, stay tuned for that. Don't go anywhere. When you return, library chat.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. When we left off, we were talking about seagulls and how they're learning from humans and my traumatizing past with seagulls. So I'll accept donations, monetary value for compensation for my heartbreak. I'll accept, scraps of food, pot chocolate, anything really. I'll tell you, I'll take it. And now for this next story, it's believed that a clumsy schoolboy dropped what appears to be a chocolate chip cookie while leafing through a book more than 50 years ago. The manuscript, which dates back almost 500 years, was given to the university by a grammar school in 1970. The 1529 volume from the complete works of St. Augustine is stored inside the university's rare books archive, where no food, drink, or pens are allowed. Emily Durish, deputy keeper of rare books and early manuscripts, discovered the biscuit. She told The Sun, "It's probably a schoolboy looking back at the book about 50 years ago, who then accidentally dropped a biscuit and forgot about it." I don't know what schoolboy would forget about a biscuit. Biscuit means cookie in the UK, by the way. Weirdos. When we receive the book, somebody will have a brief look at it and store it away. And nobody has properly looked at it since. There you go. So you might find a cookie in your book next time you're in the library, a little snack. Probably don't eat it if it's 50 years old. So a couple of weird things that have happened in libraries. Let's get into that. Number one. The musical Streaker. Patron at the local public library returned a VHS tape a few years back. She complained about the additional film after the credits. Someone had videotaped themselves playing the xylophone naked. Yeah. The offender made sure his face was not in the film. Local librarians ended up checking every VHS tape on the collection and found several more instances of this. He'd even gone so far as to mark the tapes that he'd already modified. Apparently his goal was to add footage of himself on each and every one. Eventually they were able to catch the guy, but that is one of the weirder stories I've heard from a library. But let's see if we can top that in this list. Someone went through a romance novel and censored all the profanity with a black permanent marker. They left in all the sexually explicit romance novel sex scenes. So there you go. A co-worker was checking a huge bin a few months ago, and it stank very bad. And there was a turd smashed between two picture books. Patron was not as mortified as she should have been. Maybe it was her. Did you think about that? I worked at a large central library for a year. The book drop was a large mechanical thing with a conveyor belt that brought all the books down a couple of floors into a basement room where they all dropped out on a table and could be sorted. One morning, we all noticed that it looked like 0 books had come overnight. Conveyor was so jammed that we sent the janitor up to investigate. Some rattling, and the pile of books comes sliding down the chute. More rattling. Janitor comes back down 5 minutes later, asking for latex gloves. And someone found him a pair. He went back. He returned a minute later with an 8-inch purple dildo that had jammed the conveyor belt. A classic move. Always jamming up library conveyor belts. Right? Definitely not. A book got run over by a car. There were a full set of weird tracks on the cover. Tore the spine right off, bent lots of pages, but didn't rip the mylar cover. Somehow it got past check-in shelves because it could still shut. It's harsh. Probably wasn't that bad, right? I worked at a decent-sized library one morning before it opened. My coworkers and I were picking up from the book drop, and I lifted up a book, and there was, staring right back at me, a used condom. Hopefully not from inside the library, but you never know. I once opened a book to find 2/3 of an intact meat pie inside. In New Zealand, this is a common convenience store snack. I guess sort of like a Jamaican patty over here, you know. We always encourage bookmarks, give them out quite frequently. One time a book was returned with a bookmark of a tortilla. How does that happen? Well, it's taco night, you know. It's taco night. You want to get some reading done while the meat is searing. I worked in a library for several years, and I once found an entire cherry pie in the book drop. It was whole in a box. Like somebody had tried to do a nice thing and give us a pie, but the library was closed. I hope they ate it. It's nice, a pie. We had a book returned by a teen patron with a bone from a fried chicken wing as a bookmark. Well, when you're done with it. Years ago, we had a bunch of DVDs returned with a half dozen, mostly live earwigs in it, including the DVD themselves. One of the DVDs had been exposed to some sort of liquid which made the paper cover mildewy. So it wasn't like they put the earwigs in it. I was working at a library in my university. It was in a bathroom when I saw a cell number on the wall. Treasure hunt. I got to hunt down the book. Inside there was a scrap of paper with another call number from a different floor. Go through 3 more books before I finally found the treasure. It was hardcore porn, badly photocopied. Not quite a treasure. I'll never forget the first time I was unloading the drive-through book drop and I heard a little girl talking. She was asking her mom about the drop. Seeming very curious and interested, she decided to experiment by dropping a single animal cracker, then another and another. Chuckling at this point, finding it amusing by how excited she was getting watching the animal crackers disappear down the chute. About 20 crackers later, her mom decided it was time to drop the books in, putting them all in at once. Crackers at the bottom obviously exploded from the impact, causing the little girl to squeal with glee. And then I realized I was going to have to clean them up. Turns out that some of the crackers were in her mouth and were pretty soggy, making them smush. And one final one. I had someone slip their MacBook Air through the drop. She wasn't very nice about getting it back. When we come back, some stupid stories. Some very dumb things that people have done. When we return from our break, so don't go anywhere.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back. When we left off from the break, we were talking about weird things that have happened in libraries over time. And now, plastic plants. They need love too, right? They don't, however, need water. Contrary to popular belief. There's something great about buying a plant, taking care of it, and actually having it survive for more than a week or two. So imagine the shock that one woman must have felt when she realized that a plant that she'd been caring for and watering for 2 years was actually made of plastic. Kaylee Wilkes shared her story on a Facebook page. She wrote, "I had this beautiful succulent for about 2 years ago. I was so proud of this plant. It was full, beautiful coloring, just an overall perfect plant. I had it up in my kitchen window. I had a watering plan for it. You know, if someone else tried to water my succulent, I get so defensive, because I just want to keep good care of it. I absolutely loved my succulent. Unfortunately, when she decided to transplant the plant to a new vase, she made a shocking discovery. I go to pull it from the original plastic container that I purchased only to learn the plant was fake. Put so much love into the plant, washed its leaves, tried my hardest to keep it looking its best, and it's plastic. How did I not know this? Pulled the container, sitting on styrofoam with a stand glued to the top. To be fair, if you look at the photos, it does look pretty real on top, but it's clearly not alive once you see the roots. So, Stupid people stories. Let's get into it. My freshman year roommate dropped a class because he wanted to play his PlayStation more, put him below the minimum credit threshold for his scholarship, and his parents owed $40,000. Whoops. A guy I worked with named Buddy bought a huge Snap-on rollaway toolbox for $3,000 on credit. 2 days later, he sold it to a coworker for $1,500 due to some bills that he had to pay half the price 2 days later. Needless to say, he never paid Snap-on for the toolbox. He was off into the winds after he was fired for starting his 4th fist fight at work. One of the other guys I worked with told the Snap-on salesman where Buddy's new job was. Last we heard, they're now garnishing his wages. Guy was a nutcase, though. He was very thin-skinned, and the slightest thing would set him off. He'd go absolutely nuts when he was set off. Yelled at the security guard who threatened to have him fired because he didn't like his tone. He almost got fired 3 times for fist fighting, and was unable to win the department manager over the 4th time. Oh, and one time he was told to put caution tape across a malfunctioning gate and said, "I don't know how." Things are hard for some people. My friend's father robbed a bank in a small town in Indiana where he lived. It was in the late 70s or early 80s. He spent 10 years in prison for the crime. Same day he was released from prison, he robbed the bank yet again. He was caught and back to prison. He He did not learn in those 10 years not to rob any banks or anything in that matter. My friend was like, this is what every father does. Didn't seem shocked over it. A guy I went to high school with at a party asked the homeowner if he could have her tattoo kit. Obviously, she said no. He left and came back an hour later with a ski mask demanding for the tattoo kit and was arrested the next day. Because obviously she knew who it was. Can't make up that kind of stupidity. I once called an Uber driver. When he arrived, he immediately asked me, "Are you going to this location?" I said no. He responded, "Great, because I'm not going to take you to that location." "Fine," I said. Journey got underway. I was curious to ask what he would have done if I said yes, if I wanted to go to this location. I said, "What would you have done if I did want to go there?" He said, "Look, man, I'm not taking you, okay? I already told you." It's a bit befuddled, but I tried. No, I don't want to go. You already know where I want to go. It's in your destination. I was just curious. Why would you have refused my trip? Would you have driven off? He said, "Look, man, I can't change the trip now. Look, anyway, I already told you I refuse. You got to understand I'm busy." Spent nearly 15 minutes with this back and forth. He was a fluent English speaker, by the way. By the end of it, I was 100% convinced that he couldn't understand the syntax of the hypothetical. Literally couldn't understand the question. I wasn't even mad. I was just astonished, like how he navigated through life thus far. Or his financial decisions, like I wanted to follow him, make a reality TV show about him. This girl I went to school with that had thought that Earth had 2 moons and adamantly argued with me and the teacher. I worked in a hay press for about a month. Most guys had high school education. One particular guy was telling me about the girls that he was talking to on Tinder or Hinge or some other dating app. When he said that she was in New York, he wanted to go visit her. I told him that's pretty cool and New York would be quite a change from our little town. He asked how close New York was. We were in Washington State and he had no idea that New York was over 2,000 miles away. How do you even get to talk to somebody on Tinder did you have no limits? I almost dated a girl who thought the sun and the moon were the same thing. It's pretty much the same as the earlier one. Coworker was anti-windmills when I asked why. She said, "There are too many popping up. We're going to use up all the wind." I was speechless. My 24-year-old cousin thought that my sister being vegetarian meant that she could not eat animal crackers. A girl from high school believed that outer space isn't real, and Benjamin Franklin invented the time machine. Was unaware of hammers. Funnily enough, she was a good student. Went on to a prestigious university. So don't let those degrees fool you. And here we go. There was a receptionist at the veterinary office taking our dogs to over the past few years who argued with my dad about how to pronounce his own name. He went on to pick up some something for our dog Daisy, and the girl asked the name of the dog, name of the owner. "We have it listed as Michelle, and you don't look like a Michelle." Dad said how it was spelled on the monitor, and sure enough, it was spelled Michael. That's name. It says Michael, that's my name. She argued with him about it. She had to get his driver's license out to show him. And then she finally relented, let him pick up whatever it was that he was there to pick up, and she was adamant that my dad had been mispronouncing his own name for 50 years. Best part is my dad tells us this whole story. We think nothing of it till 3 months later my mom took the dog for the checkup, and the girl still thought the owner of the dog was Michelle. And that my mom must be in a lesbian relationship, and my mom corrected that it was Michael, and the girl was adamant it was pronounced Michelle. Mom, bemused, said it's literally a name from the Bible. It's pronounced Michael and has been for thousands of years. The receptionist sat in silence. Amount of talking for the rest of the village. People are dumb, and it's fun. When we return, a dumb break-in.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, welcome back. When we left off from the break, we were talking about dumb stories. I literally have like 20 something more, but we should probably get into another story, right? So maybe I'll bring those back at the end. In fact, I think I will. A California man has been accused of entering a home and being found pantsless, making scrambled eggs, and eating flan. According to Riverside County Jail's inmate records, Carl Cremino, 61, of Desert Hot Springs, was booked on a charge of burglary on Tuesday morning. Those in Riverside County home said that they woke to loud banging and yelling at around 7:30 a.m. According to the Desert Sun, they were discovered a half-naked man scrambling eggs, a classic sight, with bologna and ranch dressing. And snacking on flan. That's a lot of things. I would have been mad if he made a flan and he ate it. I wouldn't have been mad if he made a flan and he ate it. Melanie said she was at home with her cousins, a 19-year-old woman and a 14-year-old boy. Around 40 minutes later, police officials arrived on the scene and removed the man from the home. The publication says they had to use a police dog to take the uncooperative man home into custody. Local newspaper reports said that he was incoherent and placed on a gurney, adding that the home residents who said they were unhurt believed the suspect entered through an unlocked door. Past jail record says that he was out on bail after an arrest in late January on drug-related charges. While it would certainly be scary waking up to a stranger cooking in the kitchen, Rivera and her cousin said they didn't seem too bothered. Which is kind of like, wow, that really happened. We were just laughing. It's a good humor to have about it. Some other weird home intrusions. Imagine arriving home to a pizza baking in your oven. Great, right? Not if the pizza baker was an intruder wearing your slippers and making dinner for his kids, who were also present. In July 2013, a man named Montego Logan slipped into a home in Oklahoma City, along with his daughters, and actually welcomed home the place's resident who freaked out, obviously, and called the cops. It wasn't until they arrived and questioned him about his home that he became violent and was arrested. Sadly, the homeowner will never enjoy pizza the same way again. In 2014, homeowners in Allentown, Pennsylvania, were thrilled when they sold their home for just over $400 million to John Pfeiffer Jr. But according to the Philadelphia Magazine, during the home sellers last night sleeping in the house, mere hours before closing, they caught Pfeiffer breaking into the home he'd owned later that day. Police found 2 cans of charcoal lighter fluid, hickory chips, and latex gloves. They suspected that he might have been planning to burn down the house, in a weird way of saying that he wanted to back out, maybe. Pfeiffer was charged with burglary and a crime of mischief. When you've known someone for 10 years, you wouldn't think that the individual would rob your home, especially on Christmas Eve. Especially not your pastor. In 2010, neighbors called the cops after watching a woman break into the home next door, and police found her carrying fur coats and into her Jaguar. Fur thief told the cops that she was merely protecting the valuables by moving them to a safer location. However, when homeowner Sarita Agnew drove home and heard what happened, she didn't buy it. She identified the intruder as Sandy McGriff, 52-year-old pastor from a nearby church that she was once a member. Turns out the woman of the cloth had a rap sheet stretching back to her youth. If you're going to be a criminal, disguise yourself. That's good. Apparently the threat of going to prison isn't enough to keep some people from their Facebook accounts. In 2014, Nick Wig allegedly broke into a house in Minneapolis and stole some cash, checkbook, credit cards, and a watch. He could have had a clean getaway, but he was unable to resist the siren call of a laptop nearby, and he logged into his Facebook account and left it open for the homeowner, James Wood, to pursue once he returned. Social media is addictive, guys. Wood discovered his valuables gone, called the police, and studied Wig's Facebook page carefully. He then kept his eyes peeled while driving around the town, and as luck would have it, he spotted Wig later that day just walking around wearing a stolen watch. Wig was charged with burglary, but we're not sure if he ever got cured of his Facebook addiction. You know what I mean. Another dumb crime. If you have ever driven by a beautiful house and thought, wow, I wish that were my home. Well, in September 2015, Christopher Hitchcock had such a thought while cruising by a home in Kamloops, British Columbia. He then decided to pull into into the driveway, walk right into the door, which was open. And he made himself comfortable. Sounds like the beginning of Goldilocks, doesn't it? Right? From there, he immediately started straightening up the place. No, it really does sound like Goldilocks. According to the CBC News Nova Scotia, he did the owner's laundry. He fed their cats and horses. This actually doesn't sound so bad. I'm kind of on board with this. He then showered and shaved. This is really sounding like This is real life Goldilocks, I'm pretty sure. Except without the bears. Well, we'll find out. Yet to come. He even wrote in the real homeowner's diary, Day 1. Today was my first full day at the ranch. There's so much I can do here. And I have to remind myself to just relax and take my time. I mean, this has got to be a joke, right? Right? Or the sweetest and most endearing thing I've ever heard. Oddly, Hitchcock's diary betrays the vague awareness that this home was not his. I saw a picture in the basement on the wall of a man holding and weighing a fish on the boat. Looking at him, I realized we look a lot alike, but I think I'm more handsome. Real homeowners found him sipping coffee and watching TV. Frozen steak thawing on their kitchen counter. The police were called, and Hitchcock was arrested. He was later released on probation, told the authorities he had no home. Might just go and live in the woods. Kind of admire him. You know? He's bold. I'll give him that. He's a bold guy. Kind of like him. Seems cheeky. Bizarre though, right? Gotta love a silly home intruder story, you know? Just lock your doors, guys. When we come back from the break, I think I'm gonna continue with those dumb human stories because they were quite fun for me. So we're gonna do a couple more of that when we return from our break. So don't go anywhere to hear those.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right. Welcome back. When we left off for the break, we were talking about some dumb criminals doing some silly break-ins. And now we're going to go back to our stories about just stupid things that smart humans have done. So let's start here. A guy stole a bike. Cop stopped him and asked him where he got it, and he said he stole it. Is that dumb or just very honest and kind of lovely? When I was in the military, we had to halt at a convoy due to its broken down truck. So I was standing around with a few others for security when I hear a driver behind us yelling for his squad leader. Looking to see what he needed, I observe thick smoke billowing from his truck, and he keeps yelling, "My truck is on fire!" Without getting out of his seat in an attempt to extinguish the fire, remove the weapons, ammo, and sensitive electronics, I was dumbfounded. This person, when asked who the dumbest person they know is, said, "My sister, who carved a swastika on her own arm." That is dumb. This person helped a client out with his car, some merchandise. He struggled for a bit to get the vehicle. I jokingly asked if it was in his car, and he backed, looked up, and said, "No, this isn't my car." Went to a different color and make of car in the lot. There were only 3 cars in the lot. This girl I used to work with before she got fired. One day she came to work with a broken arm. Claimed her boyfriend pushed her during a fight and she fell. We were all super concerned for her until she came in a week later saying she stabbed her boyfriend in the hand during a fight to get back at him for breaking her arm. A few weeks later, she told everyone she was secretly trying to get pregnant because if she got pregnant, her unemployed boyfriend would have to get a job and pay rent. And she got pregnant and her boyfriend immediately dumped her. That one's kind of sad. A 17-year-old claimed that his IQ is 1.7 if you round up. Uh-oh. First time I ever met my future sister-in-law, she asked me, "If you're Canadian, how come you speak American?" She was 20 at the time. Feel personally offended by that. There was a guy at my high school that wasn't too bright and was mostly harmless, but halfway through, he decided that he was going to be a thug. One day he goes to class first years when their teacher wasn't there and robbed all their electronics cash valuables at knife point without covering his face. And before he left, he gave them his real name, saying, "And you better not tell them it was me, Jim Conrad, that stole all your stuff." He then proceeded to leave school grounds with all the stolen stuff. but decides against stashing it off campus, so came back with all the stolen stuff in his backpack and went to spy on the class with his backpack full of loot while police officers were taking statements to make sure they weren't ratting him out. Kids ratted him all ratted him out. When he hears his name, he stops proclaiming he'd gut them if they didn't back off, saying that he did it with all the officers still in the class and his loot on his back. He was expelled and arrested. Obviously. I had a manager named Roxanne. She was a bleach blonde. Literally would bleach her hair once a month and then wonder why it broke and fell out. Bubblehead, who only had the job because Daddy owned the restaurant. Rocky was really obsessed with her looks and not much else. She told me, a coworker, that she had a nose job done so that her eventual children wouldn't grow up with the same nose as her. She wasn't kidding. We just knew, we looked at each other and walked away. We knew it wasn't worth the effort. I work with a guy who honestly believes he won't die and believes that doctors are part of the system and lie to you for profit and personal gain. He believes that Eastern traditional medicine, and if you're interested to know his secret to eternal life, it's 6 raw eggs and a keto diet. I work for a small retailer, and we had that guy for a while. He would call every day and ask the same questions, and no, not in a different way. That could be construed as clever. Person who couldn't figure out how the key fob for his own car worked and had a 5-year-old daughter let him into his own car. He has kids. Let that sink in for a second. He's incapable of basic math, besides addition and subtraction. We buy stuff, and when we tell him he's got 30%, he didn't understand what that meant. He asked every time how much he's getting, despite not understanding the answer. I'm not sure he actually knows how to drive. We have a dumpster in our parking lot, and he manages to bump it every time with his car. Every time he leaves, we have to move it because he hits it on the way in and out. Back to the fact that he's a father somehow. He's an awful parent. We've witnessed him telling his kids they're worthless, terrible, stupid, dumb, and any other number of insults. Unfortunately, that's not something we can report to CPS. We've watched him on more than one occasion fail to open the door to the bathroom, simply walk into it face first. He once came in with a hamburger of some sort. While eating it, he pulled a packet of mustard out of his pocket. And then he put the mustard on instead of putting the mustard on his hamburger, he bit into the packet and sucked the mustard out. I could keep going. My friend's sister was 20 and pregnant. She said something about how upset she would be when her would be ruined. I jokingly said, maybe it'll come out of your butt instead. And she said, what do you mean? They could come out of there too? I thought she was joking, and I said, yeah, it's a 50-50 shot. She thought I was serious and asked the doctor if that was a possibility. Guy in high school was convinced that the Dutch had sore throats from their accent and language. While we were at the shooting range, his gun jammed and he looked down the barrel to see what was wrong. No. Let's go with one more. An old coworker of mine was helping me move when we were carrying a couch and he dropped it. Thinking I was hurt, he asked if I was okay. And in the most serious, frightened look in his eyes, he pointed and said, look, it's the moon and it's daytime. He was 25 at the time. I love these. I love these little silly stories about people being less than intelligent. Super fun. It reminds you that even grown adults can make some silly mistakes that give us all the giggles. So that's super fun. And with that, we've come to the end of the podcast. So thank you for listening to the Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write us a nice review and rate the episode. That really helps us. And of course, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and of course, Instagram. Also really, really helps us. And thank you so much for listening, and have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.